Hi, this is Scott Bradfield. This is the Idiot's Guide to Literature and Creative Writing, or whatever it's called from term to term. This is the third brief lecture on Nabokov's Laughter in the Dark for a term in which we will be discussing only Nabokov. I wanted to take us, we've talked a bit about just the basic techniques in Nabokov are the same basic techniques in all good writers. It could be Agatha Christie. It could be a detective novelist. It could be any novelist that you enjoy reading at the beach, or it could be a great literary novelist. It doesn't matter. The basic techniques are the same: creating the detail of the world, telling stories from beginning, middle to end, to see the world from the point of view of your characters, even if, as in Laughter in the Dark, you might shift point of view several times in the course of the story and go from Albinus to Margot to Paul. You're not going to shift a lot, even in a very, very complicated novel like Laughter in the Dark. I wanted to start with a memory, an anecdote. When I was young, a long time ago, one of my favorite writers was a man named Ken Kesey. When I was about 15, I'd read his novel, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and his second novel, Sometimes a Great Notion, and they were really big, broad, beautiful books to me. I was very affected by them. I read them many times, and I taught them at various times. Now, he was not a successful novelist in the sense that he kind of stopped, unlike Nabokov or many of the writers I'm advising you to read. He really kind of just became a celebrity, and he stopped writing novels. And his novels were big and messy, but they didn't have the kind of coherence and the steady hand that you would have in a Nabokov or a Graham Greene. But he was still interesting to me. When I was in my 30s, I had the opportunity to meet him for dinner. He was brought as a guest to the University of Connecticut. And I don't want to say bad things about him because he was clearly an older man. It was a bit self-involved, and he was at the end of a career which had written some wonderful books when he was young. But we went in to have dinner with him, and it was one of the worst dinners I've ever been to. About 5 minutes into the dinner, it was clear that this man was going to orate and just talk, and he never stopped talking about himself. And about 20 minutes into the dinner, he started to say, I want you to know something about literature. Literature is like a magic trick. And he said, I'm going to show you something. And he went up, it was like a 65-year-old man. He was wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt. And he went up to his hotel room, and he came back with some of these cheesy little magic tricks that you can buy at any novelty shop. And he showed us how to, I don't remember, invisible thread, or he made a mouse move. I can't remember. They were terrible tricks. And he kept saying, literature, creating fiction is like make magical tricks, and you do this, and you show your left hand and your right hand, and you don't show them what the right hands do. And this man went on. He went on for hours. It was the worst dinner, one of the worst dinners I've ever sat through. Now, one of the reasons I think of Kesey is that he sat there and spent 2 or 3 hours telling us the obvious. Fiction is a set of techniques. It's what we've been saying in all of my classes for a long time. Point of view, narrative time, being able to tell a story, pretending as making your characters feel that they're in the story, making them feel that they're in a narrative scene. All of these are techniques that writers have been doing for thousands of years. The trick, if you as a reader, is just to learn those techniques. Now, point of view is one of those techniques. It's one of the major techniques, just like showing the right hand while your left hand is doing something with a coin or whatever the dealy bop is. You need to be able to know those basic techniques. One of the things that's fascinating about Nabokov is he is doing all the same things that all writers are doing, but at the same time, he's making you recognize the game. That's always of interest to Nabokov, to help you recognize as a reader that you're being played, that a trick is being played on you. Now think about this in the terms of Albinus and Rex, Axel Rex, this horrible man. Nabokov writes a lot about horrible people. And Axel Rex, and you're going to see some other horrible people in Lolita, is one of his most horrible. He likes to play tricks on people in which they never know who's playing the trick on them. And he likes to play tricks to make them look stupid and foolish and to have sex with their wife while they're thinking that they're in a room by themselves, to do everything he can with the tricks of the game to make fools of people. Now, think about that in terms of Nabokov, because Nabokov, particularly when we get into Lolita, is going to be playing games with you. And I want you to think of two scenes. One, think about point of view and what Nabokov wants to do with point of view. I'm going to read a very brief passage, which we already talked about. Page 16 of my edition, 15 to 16, the first time that Albinus meets Elizabeth. And it's a very brief story about meeting Elizabeth and getting married to her. He married, but though he loved Elizabeth after a manner, she failed to give him the thrill for which he had grown weary with longing. She was the daughter of a well-known theatrical manager, a willowy, wispy, fair-haired girl with colorless eyes and pathetic little pimples just above that kind of small nose which English lady novelists called retroussé. Note the second E added for safety. Her skin was so delicate that the least touch left a pink spot on it, slow to fade. He married her because it just happened so. A trip to the mountains in her company, plus her fat brother, and a remarkably athletic female cousin who, thank God, finally sprained an ankle in Pontresina, was chiefly responsible for their union. Now look at all the details in that. Albinus's details of the world, the physicality when he meets these people, and think about the character of Paul, the fat brother. When Albinus first sees him, he's dismissed as the fat brother, someone of no interest. Point of view is going to put us in a lot of interesting situations in Nabokov. The fat brother, as the novel progresses, becomes one of the most sensitive and most interesting characters in the entire novel. He's the one person who goes after Rex and actually starts to hit him. When you get near the end of the novel, it's at page 278, he's the one that really recognizes what's going on while Albinus has become totally hopeless. Paul is the one who feels for this family, who feels for his niece, who even feels for poor Albinus, who's been so horrible to his family. He becomes a very, very interesting and sensitive and important person in the novel, and one of the good people in the novel. And on 278, he's the one who gets the revenge on horrible Axel. When Rex says, "You spoiled everything," Paul seized the blind man's stick, caught up with Rex, who turned round and held up his hands to protect himself, and Paul, good-natured Paul, who had never in his life hit a living creature, swung out mightily at Rex's head and got it with a tremendous bang. Rex leaped back, his face still twisted in a smile, and suddenly something very remarkable occurred. Like Adam after the fall, Rex, cowering by the white wall and grinning wanly, covered his nakedness with his hand. The orchestrator of all these horrible pranks is caught naked by the most powerful person in the book, who is Paul, who cares about people, who catches this game being played on his horrible brother-in-law, and who actually enacts the punishment on this man. Paul becomes a very powerful person in the book. The game player, the hoaxer, Rex, is made naked, is brought forth, is revealed as this horrible man. And that, for Nabokov, and again, we're getting past technique here, but the interest in the basic techniques of fiction as having something even greater than simply being able to write a good story for Nabokov, they can do something more important. And I want you to think about that when you look at the passages, when we think about omniscient narrators this technique, which you really should not use until you become as good as Nabokov. If you close the book, you've had this whole story, you've had this staging, you've moved through the techniques of all these different characters, and you've come into that last scene where Albinus is completely undone. And then you have the stage directions in those last two paragraphs where you pull back from the whole story. Just as in the beginning of the book, you come in and say, and the book says, we would tell you the story of a man, he gets married, he suffers. There's your omniscient narrator. You close stage directions for the last silent scene. And if you look back over those last paragraphs, you see Nabokov bringing the reader back, seeing this entire sordid, sad, completed story as the tragedy of a man who does not recognize the stories being played around him or his impact on other people. And for Nabokov, this is an important place for the reader to be, to recognize that they are in a story that's being manufactured for them, so they're not these victims like Albinus, that they are involved and participatory in the story. And this is something we're going to see. I'm making a big point on this right now because for all these great techniques in Nabokov, he is going to come back to this again and again. You are in the story. You are involved in the story, and you're partially responsible for the story. And this person laughing out there in the dark, this Albinus, this Rex, this Axel Rex, who may be laughing at you in the dark, is not the person you want to be. He wants you to look at the story and to feel something for these characters, even the horrible ones, like Albinus. That's my take on this wonderful novel. And we can think about all of these techniques, all of these issues, because when we go into Lolita, we will go into hyperdrive. All of this stuff will be extremely embellished and complicated to a huge, a great degree beyond what we're seeing in Laughter in the Dark. But the main premises will be expanded exponentially. It will be a much more complicated and even more beautiful book. So keep on your toes, Nabokov says. You're being manipulated. Of course it's a magic trick. Don't be an idiot. And be aware that it's a game. Okay? So that's what we're after. We'll see you in a couple weeks when we start Lolita.